The distress beacon from New Harmony began transmitting at 8:47 hours, Galactic Standard Time, on what would become known as the Day of Abandonment. Governor Sarah Chen's voice, steady despite the fear that gripped her heart, carried across the void to every Alliance station within 100 light-years. "This is Governor Sarah Chen of New Harmony Colony, broadcasting emergency code Alphared. We are under attack by Krell forces. Orbital bombardment has destroyed our primary defense grid. Estimate 150,000 civilian lives at risk. Requesting immediate military assistance per Alliance Charter Article 12, Section 7. Please respond." Sarah Chen was 42 years old, a career colonial administrator who had spent 15 years building New Harmony from an outpost of 300 into a thriving community of farmers, researchers, and families. She had a husband, 2 daughters, and a deep belief that humanity's membership in the Galactic Alliance meant something. That belief was about to be tested in ways she could never have imagined. The Krell marauders had spotted New Harmony 3 weeks earlier during a deep space raid. To G.A. Trek, the Krell commander, it represented an ideal target, wealthy enough to be worth looting, remote enough to be vulnerable, and defended by nothing more than a token security force and outdated orbital platforms. He had led raids on 17 worlds in his 20-year career. This would be his 18th, and he expected it to be routine. The first missiles struck New Harmony's defense platforms at 8:30 hours. By 900 hours, the colony's modest military capabilities had been reduced to smoking debris. Sarah Chen watched from the emergency command center as Krell landing craft began their descent, each one carrying troops equipped for systematic pillaging and pacification. She sent her family into the underground shelters with the other colonists and continued broadcasting her pleas for help. On the Alliance Council Station, 300 light-years away, Ambassador Marcus Webb stood in the circular chamber where representatives from 47 species gathered to govern the galactic community. He had received Governor Chen's distress call within minutes of its transmission, and he had immediately invoked the emergency protocols that should have triggered an automatic military response. Marcus Webb was 56, a former Marine officer turned diplomat who had fought for his appointment to the Council because he believed humanity deserved a voice in galactic affairs. He was a tall man with gray hair and sharp eyes that had seen combat on 2 worlds before he traded his uniform for diplomatic credentials. Those eyes now burned with barely controlled fury as he listened to the council debate. "The situation is regrettable," said Ambassador Viren, a reptilian being whose species had held a council seat for 3 centuries. "However, New Harmony is located outside our primary defensive perimeter. The commitment of military resources would require you to honor your treaty obligations," Marcus interrupted, his voice cutting across the chamber like a blade. "Article 12 is explicit. Any Alliance member under attack has the right to military assistance. We're not asking for a favor. We're invoking a treaty right." Ambassador Silurian, whose crystalline form refracted light in shifting patterns, responded with the kind of measured calm that Marcus had learned to hate. "Ambassador Webb, no one disputes the legal framework. However, the nearest Alliance fleet is 6 days away from New Harmony. By the time they arrive, the tactical situation will have resolved itself. We must consider whether the expenditure of resources, Marcus's voice rose despite his efforts to maintain diplomatic composure. "There are 150,000 human beings on that colony, children, families, scientists, farmers. You're discussing them like they're line items in a budget report." "We understand your emotional investment," Viren said, his tone suggesting he understood nothing of the sort. "But the Council must consider the broader strategic implications. The Krell are operating from outside Alliance space. A military response could be interpreted as aggression beyond our borders. We must be cautious." The debate continued for hours, then days. Every 6 hours, Sarah Chen's voice returned to the council chambers, each transmission more desperate than the last. Marcus Webb listened to her describe the Krell ground assault, the colony's failing defenses, the growing casualty lists. He listened to her beg, plead, and finally, in her last transmission, simply weep. By the time the council convened its final vote on the third day, New Harmony had gone silent. The vote was 42-5 against military intervention. The 5 votes in favor came from humanity and 4 younger species who still remembered what it was like to be vulnerable. The 42 votes against came from established powers who had grown comfortable behind their layers of bureaucracy and strategic calculation. Marcus Webb stood before the council for the last time as ambassador. His voice was quiet now, drained of the passion that had filled it during 3 days of futile argument. You've just taught humanity that we stand alone in this galaxy. I hope you never need us to remember this lesson. He transmitted his resignation to Earth and left the council chambers. He would never return. The human rescue fleet arrived at New Harmony 5 days after the attack began. They found a colony in ruins. The Krell had been methodical in their destruction, burning everything that couldn't be looted and executing anyone who resisted. Of the 150,000 colonists, 23,000 had survived by fleeing into the wilderness. Governor Sarah Chen was not among them. She had remained at her post in the command center, broadcasting until the Krell breached the doors. Her final transmission, lasting 3 seconds, was simply, "Tell Earth we needed them." Earth heard, and Earth remembered. Admiral James Kurosawa received his orders 6 days after the New Harmony massacre. He was called to a private meeting in Geneva with the Secretary General and the heads of Earth's militaries. What transpired in that room remained classified, but when Kurosawa emerged 8 hours later, he had been given authority unprecedented in human history: unlimited resources, unlimited personnel, and a single mandate: ensure New Harmony never happens again. Kurosawa was 61, a career naval officer who had commanded Earth's modest defense fleet for 12 years. He was a student of military history, with a particular fascination for the great fleet commanders of human history: Nelson, Yamamoto, Zheng He. He understood strategy, logistics, and the cold mathematics of warfare. He also understood something that the Galactic Alliance had forgotten: that the purpose of military strength wasn't to start wars, but to prevent them through the certainty of consequences. He began building his fleet in secret. Over the next 5 years, Earth underwent a transformation that went unnoticed by the galactic community. Hundreds of cargo freighters quietly disappeared from commercial routes, their transponders deactivated, their cargo holds filled with raw materials bound for coordinates that existed in no public database. In the asteroid fields beyond Neptune, in the deep spaces between stars, humanity constructed shipyards on a scale never before attempted. The Terran Defense Fleet took shape in silence and shadow. 300 warships, each one incorporating lessons from 10,000 years of human warfare translated into the language of space combat. They weren't built like Alliance vessels, with their emphasis on deterrence and defensive capability. They were built like human warships had always been built: to win. While the ships took shape, Kurosawa assembled his crew. He didn't want glory seekers or politicians in uniform. He wanted veterans who understood what they were building and why. He wanted engineers who could improvise solutions under fire. He wanted tactical officers who had studied the Punic Wars as well as the Battle of Midway, who understood that warfare was ultimately about will, resources, and the willingness to endure. Most importantly, he wanted people who remembered New Harmony. Every ship in the Terran Defense Fleet carried the names of colonists who had died. Every crew member could recite those names from memory. The flagship, a massive dreadnought bristling with weapon systems that would have horrified Alliance engineers, was christened the TDS Remembrance. On its bridge, a plaque listed 127,000 names in microscopic text. Kurosawa read them every day. Earth's withdrawal from active Galactic Alliance participation was interpreted as sulking by most species. Human diplomats still attended council sessions, but they sat in silence, observing rather than participating. Human trade continued, but captains became tight-lipped about their routes and schedules. The general consensus among Alliance members was that humanity was learning its place in the galactic hierarchy, important enough to be included, but not important enough to be taken seriously. They didn't notice the missing freighters. They didn't notice the sudden increase in raw material extraction from human-controlled systems. They didn't notice that every human ship, from the smallest cargo hauler to the largest passenger liner, now carried military-grade sensors and transmitted encrypted data back to Earth. They noticed the Krell, though. Emboldened by the Alliance's failure to respond to the New Harmony attack, the Krell expanded their operations. They hit a Virin mining outpost, killing 800 workers. They raided a Silurian trade station, making off with millions in goods and technology. They even struck at 2 minor Alliance worlds, testing the boundaries of what they could accomplish without triggering a meaningful response. Each time the Alliance Council convened. Each time they debated jurisdiction, resource allocation, and strategic priorities. Each time, by the time they reached a decision, the Krell were gone and the body count was final. The pattern became predictable. Attack, outrage, debate, delay, strongly worded statement, repeat. The Virin, who had voted against helping New Harmony, found themselves pleading for Alliance intervention using the exact same arguments Marcus Webb had used 5 years earlier. The irony was lost on them, but noted by the silent human observer in the council chambers. That observer was Admiral Elena Vasquez, Kurosawa's former second-in-command, who had traded her uniform for diplomatic credentials. She sat through every council session, watched every debate, and reported everything back to Earth. She was waiting for something specific, and on the 5th anniversary of the New Harmony massacre, it happened. The Krell launched their most ambitious raid yet, a full assault on Tarsus Prime, an established Virin colony world with 8 million inhabitants. HFY, now promoted to Supreme Commander of Krell raiding forces after his successful New Harmony operation, personally led the attack with his entire battle fleet. 150 warships dropped out of hyperspace above Tarsus Prime and began their assault. The Virin ambassador's emergency plea to the Council was desperate, frantic, and painfully familiar. We need immediate military intervention. 8 million lives are at stake. The Charter guarantees our right to defense. Ambassador Silurian began the familiar calculus. The nearest Alliance fleet is 4 days away. We must consider whether, Elena Vasquez stood. The chamber fell silent. In 5 years she had not spoken once during council sessions. The Terran defense fleet is already en route to Tarsus Prime, she said calmly. We will arrive in 14 hours. We are not requesting Alliance approval or support. We are informing you as a courtesy. The chamber erupted. 14 hours to Tarsus Prime was impossible with conventional drives. Earth's last military assessment, conducted 5 years ago, had shown humanity with only a modest defense fleet barely capable of system defense, let alone power projection across 100 light years. Ambassador Vasquez, Virin said slowly, Earth does not possess the military capability for such an operation. Your defense fleet is not seeking Alliance permission, Vasquez interrupted. We are going to Tarsus Prime. We are going to engage the Krell, and we are going to stop them. What you do with that information is your concern, not ours. She activated her personal display, and suddenly the council chamber's main screen filled with an image that would be replayed across the galaxy for years to come. 300 warships, moving in perfect formation through the void, each one bristling with weapons, each one painted in the stark white and blue of Earth's colors. They were using drives that shouldn't exist, moving at speeds that violated Alliance understanding of physics. At the front of the formation, the TDS Remembrance led the way. We'll send you our after-action report when we're finished, Vasquez said. She closed the display and sat down, returning to her customary silence. The council erupted into chaos. Vasquez ignored them. She had delivered her message. Now it was time for Kurosawa to deliver his. The Terran Defense Fleet dropped out of hyperspace 14 hours later, exactly as promised, positioning themselves between the Krell fleet and Tarsus Prime. On the planet's surface, 8 million Virin waited in shelters, watching their orbital defenses slowly fail under Krell bombardment. In orbit, the Krell fleet prepared for what they assumed would be another easy victory. HFY studied the human fleet with a mixture of amusement and confusion. 300 ships was impressive for a species the Alliance barely acknowledged, but the Krell had 150 battle-tested raiders, each one blooded in combat. Humans were soft creatures, new to the galaxy with no significant military tradition. This would be entertaining. On the bridge of the Remembrance, Admiral Kurosawa sat in his command chair and studied the tactical display. He saw every Krell ship, their positions, their weapons loadouts, their probable tactics. He had been studying the Krell for 5 years, analyzing every raid, every attack pattern, every decision. He knew how they fought. They were skilled individual combatants but poor strategic thinkers, relying on aggression and intimidation rather than coordination. They were raiders, not soldiers, and Kurosawa was about to teach them the difference. He opened communications on all frequencies, ensuring every ship in the sector could hear. Krell Fleet, this is Admiral James Kurosawa of the Terran Defense Fleet. 5 years ago, your forces attacked the human colony of New Harmony. You killed 127,000 civilians while the Galactic Alliance debated whether our lives were worth saving. Today is the anniversary of that massacre. We've come to settle accounts. HFY's response came quickly, his translator rendering his clicking language into flat, emotionless words. Humans, I remember your colony. They died screaming. Your fleet is impressive for primitives, but you are outmatched. Withdraw now and we will only take half your ships as prizes. Kurosawa's response was quiet but carried across every frequency. You mistake us for the Alliance. We don't debate, we don't negotiate, we act. All ships, weapons free. Let's show them how humans fight. What followed wasn't a battle in the traditional sense. It was a demonstration. The Terran fleet moved as a single organism, 300 ships operating with the precision of a single blade. The Krell charged forward in their usual manner, each ship seeking individual glory, expecting their targets to scatter in panic. Instead, the human fleet opened fire with weapons the Krell had never encountered. Kinetic missiles, traveling at relativistic speeds, bypassed energy shields and punched through armor like paper. EMP warheads detonated in carefully calculated patterns, frying Krell systems and leaving ships dead in space. Cyber warfare packages infiltrated Krell networks, turning their own weapons against them. The Krell had spent centuries fighting opponents who adhered to Alliance conventions about proportional force and civilized warfare. Humanity had spent 5 years designing weapons specifically to kill Krell ships as efficiently as possible. Within 15 minutes, 30 Krell ships were disabled or destroyed. Within 30 minutes, 70 more had joined them. The Krell fleet, which had terrorized the border worlds for decades, found itself systematically dismantled by an opponent who fought with a cold, calculated fury they had never experienced. HFY watched his fleet die and finally understood his mistake. These weren't soft Alliance species who valued life above all else. These were humans, and humans remembered their dead. His flagship shields collapsed under sustained fire. His weapons systems went offline. His engines died, leaving him drifting. He sent a surrender signal, expecting the mercy that Alliance species traditionally showed. Kurosawa's response was broadcast across the galaxy. You didn't accept Governor Chen's surrender. You didn't show mercy to farmers and children, but we are not you. Your surrender is accepted. Every surviving Krell ship will be escorted to Alliance space and handed over for trial. And then we're going to find every Krell base, every raiding station, every world that supported the attack on New Harmony, not to destroy them, but to ensure they never threaten anyone again. The Battle of Tarsus Prime lasted 43 minutes. Of 150 Krell ships, 97 were destroyed and 53 captured. The Terran Defense Fleet suffered 14 damaged ships and 0 casualties. It was the most lopsided military victory in recorded galactic history, and every species in the galaxy watched it happen. The aftermath unfolded across multiple fronts. On Tarsus Prime, 8 million Viren emerged from their shelters to find human ships in orbit, human medical teams landing to assist with casualties, human engineers already helping repair damaged infrastructure. The contrast with the Alliance's 3-day debate was not lost on them. In the Alliance Council chambers, chaos reigned. Some species demanded humanity be censured for independent military action. Others pointed out that humanity had technically violated no laws and had, in fact, fulfilled the Alliance's stated purpose better than the Alliance itself. Still others quietly began reassessing their diplomatic and military relationships, wondering what else Earth had been preparing in secret. Elena Vasquez let them debate for 3 days, the exact length of time the Council had debated New Harmony. Then she stood and addressed them for the second time. 5 years ago, you taught us that we stand alone in this galaxy, so we prepared to stand alone. You're upset that we built this fleet in secret. You abandoned 150,000 human beings to die while you debated procedures and protocols. We don't trust you with our security anymore. We can't. She transmitted a formal document that would reshape galactic politics for generations. Earth's new doctrine was simple and non-negotiable. The Terran Defense Fleet would operate independently of Alliance command. Humanity would honor its trade agreements and diplomatic obligations. But humanity would also respond to distress calls from any species, Alliance member or not, without waiting for Council approval. Any attack on human interests would receive an immediate and proportional response. The definition of proportional was solely humanity's to determine. You can accept this or not, Vasquez said. We're not asking permission. We're informing you of reality. The question you need to ask yourselves is this: do you want us as allies who act independently or as adversaries who act independently? Because after New Harmony, we will never again be the species that sits quietly while you debate whether our lives matter. The vote to accept Earth's new status was unanimous. Nobody wanted to test whether humanity was bluffing. Over the next 6 months, the Terran Defense Fleet systematically dismantled Krell raiding infrastructure across 3 sectors. They didn't annihilate the Krell. Kurosawa had been serious about humanity not being monsters. Instead, they destroyed every military installation, every raiding base, every shipyard. They left the Krell with enough defensive capability to protect their home systems but no capacity for aggression. It was a message written in the language of military force. Humanity could show mercy, but it was mercy on human terms, delivered with overwhelming power. Other species watched and learned. Distress calls that once went unanswered by the Alliance now received responses from human ships. Pirates who had operated with impunity found themselves hunted by Terran patrols. Slavers discovered that human warships didn't debate the ethics of intervention. They simply freed the slaves and arrested the slavers. The Galactic Alliance didn't collapse, but it transformed. Humanity's willingness to act without permission forced the Council to streamline its emergency response protocols. The 3-day debate became a 3-hour debate, then a 30-minute debate. Species that had grown comfortable with bureaucratic inertia found themselves competing with a human fleet that would arrive to help regardless of Council approval. Some called it human imperialism. Others called it human idealism weaponized. Kurosawa called it keeping promises, both the promise to protect humanity's interests and the promise that New Harmony would never happen again. 1 year after the Battle of Tarsus Prime, a memorial was dedicated in orbit around where New Harmony had once thrived. The colony itself was gone, its ruins long since reclaimed by the planet's ecosystem. But in orbit, a massive structure listed 127,000 names in letters large enough to be read from space. The Remembrance Memorial, as it became known, was maintained by a permanent human presence and visited by thousands of beings from dozens of species. Admiral Kurosawa attended the dedication ceremony along with the 23,000 survivors of New Harmony. He stood before the memorial with tears in his eyes and spoke words that were broadcast across the galaxy. They told us you weren't worth saving. They were wrong. Every single one of you was worth it, and we made sure the galaxy knows it now. Above him, the Terran Defense Fleet held formation, 300 ships maintaining perfect position around the memorial. They would remain there for 72 hours, 1 hour for every hour that the Alliance had debated while New Harmony died. It was a reminder, a promise, a warning. The galaxy learned 3 lessons that day. First, that humanity keeps its promises, all of them. Second, that mercy is a choice, not a weakness, and humanity would extend mercy on its own terms to those who deserved it. And third, that the most dangerous species in the galaxy isn't the one that strikes first, it's the one that remembers. In the years that followed, the phrase "remember New Harmony" became shorthand across the galaxy for a simple truth. Humanity could be patient, humanity could be diplomatic, humanity could be merciful. But humanity would never forget, and humanity would never again ask permission to protect its own. The Alliance still governed. The Council still debated. But now, when a distress call came in, the debate lasted minutes instead of days. Because everyone knew that if they waited too long, humanity would handle it themselves. And while human intervention was often effective, it came with the uncomfortable reminder that Earth no longer considered the Alliance the sole authority on when force was justified. Some species resented this new reality. Others embraced it. But all of them understood it. Earth had learned to stand alone. And standing alone, Earth had become something the galaxy hadn't seen in centuries. A power that acted based on principles rather than calculations, that valued every life within its protection, and that possessed both the capability and the will to enforce those values. The age of human independence had begun, born from the ashes of New Harmony and forged in the void between stars. It wasn't the age humanity had hoped for when they first joined the Galactic Alliance, full of optimism and idealism. It was harder than that, more complicated, born of betrayal and loss. But it was an age where humanity's children could live without fear, where human colonies knew that help would come if they called, where the name Earth meant something more than just another member species in the Alliance database. It meant a promise kept. It meant 127,000 names remembered. It meant that in a galaxy full of species that calculated the cost of every action, humanity had become the species that acted because it was right. And if that made them dangerous, if that made them unpredictable, if that made other species nervous, well, that was a price humanity was willing to pay. Because the alternative was another New Harmony, another desperate voice calling for help while others debated. Never again, Admiral Kurosawa had promised. The Terran Defense Fleet, 300 ships strong and growing, ensured that promise was kept. The galaxy had taught humanity a hard lesson, that in the void between stars, you are only as safe as you can make yourself, only as protected as your ability to enforce that protection. Humanity had learned that lesson well. And in learning it, humanity had changed the rules of the game for everyone.